Hello, my name is Lollipop Candy, and I will be discussing what makes the first chapter to a shonen manga effective. Shonen manga is a strange type of manga that is chock full of cliches, yet it keeps readers hooked. Weekly Shonen Jump is one of the most circulated manga magazines in Japan, despite the fact that the majority of the manga and its contents aren't exactly what one would call masterpieces. This made me wonder why, despite all these cliches and predictable storylines, do so many of us love these stories to death. In order to figure out this reason, I started at the first chapter. I looked at many of the most popular manga franchises: Bleach, One Piece, Hunter x Hunter, Attack on Titan, Naruto, the list goes on. The first chapters of most of the manga that I have read seem like they must include the following cliches in order to become a big worldwide success that will get readers hooked. Most of them have a stupid main protagonist who is also part delinquent, but likes to do bad things like beat up people or vandalize things. But the protagonist doesn't mean to be and feels bad about it, or some sort of insecurity. Not good at being a ninja, sensitive about being able to see ghosts, sensitive about not being tough enough, sensitive about being too tough, something like that. We see them be over the top silly and see if they have a family or not. If they don't have a family, they have some sort of guardian character who gets on their nerves, but they still like anyway. Then the teacher, bully, or first boss, like a basic monster or special monster who isn't really that strong, beats them up. Then the guardian character almost dies. The main character panics and cries about it, and then they unleash their super skill. And in almost all of them, there is a heavy amount of exposition in between each point, as well as lots of blood. Well, some more than others, but they all had some bloodshed in them. A manga that contains all those cliches can't possibly be well written. Well, not exactly. It has to do with execution. With that said, I will begin with the dissection of Naruto's first chapter, in order to explain how it is possible to have all these cliches and still have a well-written chapter of your manga. Looking at the first page, we're already to a great start. We have a quite detailed and provocative illustration of an unusual setting. The next page establishes our main character, Naruto, as a troublemaker. Then it subtly adds exposition, explaining the importance of the monuments to the setting. The school scenes give readers a sense of familiarity, but there seems to be a fun twist on the setting. The school looks pretty much like you would think a school would look like, but they are learning ninjutsu. Kishimoto subtly introduces information on the setting. Things that would be unnecessary to show are told, and things that should be emphasized are shown. This shows his skills as a mangaka. The comedy present also doesn't feel out of place, and we have an overall cheery atmosphere from the first pages of the manga. We have a sense of where we are. Masashi Kishimoto sets up the pleasant feelings so that by page 15 we are shocked by the sadness of the scene. This tells Naruto's weakness in a way that makes us feel sympathetic, since the tone of the manga has suddenly changed. This introduction of the weakness is also well done, since it is done through showing. The target audience for any shonen manga are boys of middle school age, as the word shonen or boy connotates. In Japan, it is this time period that is very stressful, and Naruto's weakness becomes understandable for anybody in that situation. This is the time period where students have to take exams and score well enough to get into a school that they want to go to. Maybe because of the academics of their parents or their friends. If they fail the exam, then they don't get to go to the school and they miss out on the opportunity and may even feel left behind. This also works in the US, where if you flunk out of classes, then you have to repeat that grade, whereas many of your friends are going on to the next grade and leaving you behind. However, later we learn that Naruto's true weakness is his feeling that he doesn't belong, because he is an orphan and he is hated by everyone. Not just school-wise, but emotionally, many people have experienced this feeling. Even if you haven't, you might be able to relate to the academic problems that Naruto goes through, or that sense of not belonging with your community. Either way, Naruto gains support from a wide audience because we know that he was pretending to be strong through his troublemaking, and in most cultures that is respected. However, the greatest achievement of this first chapter is that by page 15, we know how to characterize Naruto, what his weaknesses are, what his goals are, and where all of this takes place. Most of the manga that I have read for this video were not as precise, and many did not give us this information until a while into the next few chapters. If you can tell us all that without being obnoxious about it, then you're good at what you're doing, which is storytelling. Masashi Kishimoto understands how to introduce characters and make a solid character that we can easily understand, rather than making a wishy-washy protagonist that may seem more realistic, but is less lovable. Naruto is drawn in poses that show his lack of manners. Here is a perfect example of this. Naruto points at Iruka with his chopsticks. This is quite gross and just very disgusting thing to do. And he does this while proclaiming an important part of the story, which is his goal. Naruto is rude and obnoxious, and we can kind of understand why he is hated so much. I mean, he painted on a really important monument and then gets away with it. More conflict happens, the cliche of evil Mr. Teacher appears, and we get ready for some action scenes and more important exposition. There is a bit of literal foreshadowing of the reveal about the nine-tailed fox, which, although it is clever in a way, I think it's poorly executed since it took me more than a minute to figure out what the heck is on his face, and I had to go back and forth to figure out that they were just tails. Even at the height of conflict, there's still comedy reminding us of the overall atmosphere of this story. It's lighthearted while still touching on depressing themes. Then with the nine-tailed fox, we learn why Naruto is really hated, and it leaves enough questions for readers to want to know more about the setting and Naruto himself. Afterwards, Masashi Kishimoto shows his competency for action scenes. Here is a good example of this. Instead of fancy panels at different angles, I just called them fancy, it uses basic rectangles for panels, and it still captures the speed and movement of the characters in action. In the conclusion of the battle, Naruto shows how he is special. He has now mastered the technique that he failed at miserably in the beginning. Now the audience supports Naruto because of his hidden strength that we didn't see coming. But it's a shonen, so we totally saw this coming. We are also comforted knowing that Yusuke and the Hokage are two of his allies, so he isn't alone. Thus, the ending is heartwarming and satisfying, giving the audience a good introduction to the story, making them want to read more. Of course, no manga is perfect, so I should explain the problems with this chapter. Besides typical cliches that are really stale, one thing I couldn't understand in this chapter was why Naruto thought Yusuke didn't like him. There wasn't really any point that showed Yusuke disliking him. Yusuke may have been strict with him, but it should be clear that this is just strict and it's not abusive to Naruto. Since he tries to have him pass the exam even though he obviously failed, and he even eats ramen with him casually. Obviously, Yusuke likes him. I don't know why Naruto would think otherwise. Of course, that might be realistic in a way, since sometimes people feel like someone else might not like them for no reason. But this is a story, I need to see this evidence, otherwise I am inferring things that the story didn't tell me. It's like if I were in court and I was the witness, and I say the guy did all these things just because it seems like something he would do, but there's no evidence for that, and maybe he didn't even do any of it, so I just become a liar. The biggest problem in this chapter actually isn't a problem with this chapter in particular. It's actually something I commended it for. Masashi Kishimoto has a style of writing where he creates a lighthearted and comedic atmosphere and then smacks us with sad drama and backstory. It works really well in this first chapter, but I feel it's his biggest storytelling problem. Just because this technique works the first, second, and third time doesn't mean it's gonna work the 600 plus other times. It's this constant formulaic drama that weakened the series as a whole, and maybe one of the reasons why many people dropped the series. In conclusion, it is important to have the first chapter of your manga to be concise. We should be able to understand everything that's going on, how to characterize our main character and what's going on in his mind, plus what's going on in the setting. Then we feel more comfortable reading more. It's okay to have cliches as long as you hide them in more unique stuffs like a unique setting. It is also important to give the main character a basic characterization so when we find out more about them, then they become a more well-developed character and we can understand their decisions that they make throughout the story. I hope this gives those of you interested in writing manga a good idea of how to write your first chapter of your manga. I also hope that this opens up new discussions about how a manga could be considered good. Thank you for watching and have a nice day.